Perfect. Okay, so if you're ever experiencing any issues with your audio, first make sure the speaker icon on the left side of the top toolbar is green, which means it is enabled. If you're still having issues, please refer to the options menu on the top toolbar for additional assistance. There will be a dedicated question and answer box right underneath the video pod. This is where attendees will submit any questions they may have regarding the webinar subject matter. Please keep all questions you wish to be answered by the presenters to the Q&A box only and not to the chat box to ensure they are not missed. The Q&A box will be open throughout the entire webinar and all questions will be answered following the presentation. Please note that attendees cannot see the questions submitted by fellow participants. However, as soon as you submit your question, they will go directly to the presenters for answering when it is time. You can also submit questions during the Q&A session. There is also a chat box that can be seen by everyone, both attending and hosting the webinar. You can use this to engage with other attendees, bring any technical difficulties to the host or presenter's attention for troubleshooting, or just to provide any other comments and feedback. You can also make the text larger in this chat window by clicking the icon in the top right corner of the chat box, then selecting text size. Please note that today's presentation is available for download in the Files pod. There will also be 2 brief polls during today's presentation. When it is time, please use the reaction function, which is the hand icon located on the top toolbar. By clicking the arrow to the right side of this icon, you will be able to select agree or disagree. These reactions will be visible through the attendees listing to the right of the webinar window, which I will bring out in just a second. You can also put your answers in the chat box. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties today during the webinar, please notify us in the chat box and we will do our best to troubleshoot. And we are also playing videos for the first time during this presentation, so let us know if they are not working and we may just have to skip them. I'm going to hand it over now to our Director of Strategic Engagement and Communications, Kelsey Reimer, who will be moderating today's event.
Thanks, Adam. There's just a note here from one of the RMs, Sandy, that indicated you were echoing really badly. So I just want to do a test with myself and CK to make sure that he is not echoing. Oh, I sound fine. CK, do you just want to say good morning or something so the
Sure.
RMs
Good
can
morning,
see if you are
Sandy. How are you
echoey this
today?
morning? Let's see
Good
how
morning,
that
Sandy.
is.
Can you hear me well?
You are fine. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased that you're all joining us on the call today. I'll just give a quick introduction of CK, who will be talking about harassment prevention today in today's webinar. He has extensive experience in human resources, including developing talent management and organizational effectiveness strategies. He currently specializes in learning and training, job analysis, strategic planning, process improvement, and business planning and research. This is a great opportunity to ask the expert, so to speak. So I would encourage you all during the presentation, if you have any questions, send them in the question and answer panel box, and we can ask CK all of the questions that we might have following his presentation. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, CK. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam and Kelsey, for those kind words. We're going to get started, and good morning, and thank you all for taking the time to be here. Again, like Kelsey's mentioned, I am CK Tan. I'm a consultant with KNA HR Consulting, and I'm very excited to be here today to talk to you about respectful workplace policies. So let's start with some statistics here. In 2014, Angus Reid polled 1,500 working adult Canadians, and this is what they found out. 28% of people were sexually harassed, and 14%, or 1 out of 7, had unwanted contact. So whether it's touching or worse. So what does this mean?
CK,
Let's put this.
I'm just going to interrupt you.
Okay.
Sorry. It appears that you're echoing again. So I'm just going to see, Adam, is there anything that you can do from your end to eliminate the echo?
Yes, just give me 1 second.
Sure. Just one moment. This will be good practice for digital convention, everyone.
Okay, see if it's
Okay, go ahead, CK.
Good morning, everyone. Am I still echoing or am I good? Maybe just do a thumbs up, thumbs down on the chat box.
Oh, Sandy
Perfect.
says good. Sam says good.
Okay,
Perfect.
great.
Lynette says
Adam,
good. I think we'll try again.
awesome. All right. Thanks for saving the day, Adam. So yeah, let's start with this again for those who had missed it. In 2014, Angus Reid polled 1,500 working adult Canadians, and what they found out was 28% of people were sexually harassed, and 14% had unwanted contact, whether it's in the form of touching or worse. Now, what does that mean then to us? Again, back in 2014, there was an employee at Walmart who was bullied by a supervisor, and the employee resigned. Now, this employee then went on to sue Walmart for wrongful dismissal and infliction of mental suffering. Guess what? Walmart had to pay a $100,000 fine, and that supervisor that was involved had to pay $10,000 in fines. Note that you can be held liable for the actions of your employees if you knew or ought to have known, ought to have reasonably known that harassment was occurring and you did nothing to stop it. Now, what's not calculated here is the intangible costs, such as lost productivity, morale of the employees, and also the reputation of the business. Now, here's another interesting statistic. Again, back in 2014, and this time this research was done by Career Builder. They did a study and polled 422 Canadian employees. And this poll found that almost half of the people surveyed have experienced bullying at the workplace, but only 44% of those reported the incidents. Now, this is quite astonishing. Now, for today, you're going to be learning an incredible amount of information that's related to respectful workplace and harassment. I encourage you, if you don't already have a pen and paper, to write down important notes as we are going through today, because to me, taking notes is just going to solidify what you're going to be learning today. So I believe, again, the recording is going to be available after this meeting. So if there's anything that you've missed out on everything that we talked about, feel free to go through it again or contact any one of us. We can give you a little bit more information about it. Now, over the course of today's webinar, we're going to be talking about a few things. The first is respectful workplace. What does that mean? What is harassment? What is not harassment? And we'll talk about roles and responsibilities, because every one of us, you and I, have a role to play to ensure that the workplace that we're in is respectful and is free of harassment. And then we'll quickly touch a little bit about the investigative process. What happens when a complaint comes about? What are some steps that has to be taken to follow it through? And then we'll talk about a follow-up again on my colleague Stephen's presentation from the last webinar, where he talked about HR policy, and we'll talk a little bit more about what are some key components that needs to be in the anti-harassment policy. And we'll end by talking about management's role, because there are some legal responsibilities from management to ensuring that the workplace is respectful and free of harassment. So let's start by talking about respectful workplace. What does that mean? It seems like a big word, but let's put into perspective what it actually means here. Now, respectful workplace, it's that all employees deserve to be first treated fairly. Now, this is where you're not shown any preferential treatment or favoritism from one employee to another employee. So whatever applies to one person should apply to all. So for example, if employees are being promoted or considered for promotion, it has to be considered based on their qualification to perform on the job that they're promoting for. And it's not because of any personal relationships with the decision makers of that promotion. The second thing is, a respectful workplace is that employees are also acknowledged in each other's differences. And whether it's based on race, age, disability, sexual orientation, gender, or any other type of quality. Again, this is all about equal opportunity and where differences are acknowledged and they're respected. Now, the third thing, all employees in a respectful workplace Also provided with open, transparent, and consistent communication that's based on your policies and is based on your processes and rule books and handbooks and whatever things that you have to guide those kind of behavior. So if an employee is disciplined for breaking a rule, all employees should be disciplined if they are found to be breaking the same rules. Now, again, all employees should also have the opportunity to participate in a culture that is collaborative, and they should feel empowered to make certain decisions at the workplace. Again, following the rules of the organization and the policies to make sure that they're all kept within those bounds. And if there are any conflicts at the workplace, there has to be sufficient trust among the employees so that conflict could be addressed early and in a timely manner. Don't allow for any conflicts to stew, and because all this is doing is you're delaying the inevitable, and along the way you might be building more resentment between the parties that are in conflict. And there could be more examples to this, but these are some of the more common ones. So again, making sure that people are treated fairly, that their differences are acknowledged, that there's open and transparent communications, that they're participating in a culture that is collaborative, and there's opportunities to address conflict in a respectful way. Now, what about examples of a workplace that is not respectful? What does that look like? I'll ask you to just think back at your workplace and see if you have experienced any of these symptoms or behaviors from your colleagues or other people. So it's disruptive. Disruptive behavior, whether in the form of verbal threats, there are outbursts, there's bullying going on in the workplace, there may be some threats in behaviors or people's speeches. And a disrespectful workplace could also be one where you would notice behaviors that are demeaning or intimidating. So this could come in the form of shaming or humiliating another party. You're being spiteful, you're backstabbing another person, or you're talking bad about a staff in front of other people, or you're making insensitive jokes. You're being hostile, or sometimes maybe even invading other people's personal space here. So that could be intimidating or demeaning. And sometimes you might even come across behaviors that are passive aggressive. What does that mean? Sometimes you could be making negative comments about another coworker, or you're refusing to do work, or deliberately delaying in delivering a work, or you could be undermining a person's position or authority, and you fail to support a coworker, and maybe even intentionally communicating wrong or incomplete information to another person for them to do their job. What else? You could be uncooperative. So example could be late to meetings, you're late to work, you're not responding in a timely manner, and you're just unprepared. And another example here could be a dismissive behavior. So what does this mean? Sometimes it could be patronizing, you're gossiping and spreading rumors, or sometimes you're being impatient or not recognizing the contributions of other people or your coworkers. Again, these are just some very basic ideas of what a disrespectful workplace behaviors would look like. Now, we talked about respectful workplace and a workplace that is not respectful. Then where does harassment come in? What's the definition of that? So in the human resources world, harassment is just any conduct, comments, gestures, or contact that is inappropriate. And this is specifically related to the human rights list. And this list has, there's a string of areas where we talk about this human rights list. And it includes areas such as religion, creed, marital status, family status, sex, sexual orientation, disability, whether it's mental or physical, age, color, ancestry, nationality, place of origin, race or perceived race, receipt of public assistance, and gender identity. So I'm going to bring your attention to one of these areas here, sexual harassment. Again, because of the nature of it, sexual harassment is often talked about as a specific kind of harassment, but it's also on that human rights protectors list that I shared before. Now, according to the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission, sexual harassment may be verbal, physical, or visual. And it may be an incident or a series of incidents. And it's always, again, always unsolicited, and it's always unwelcome behavior. And it could take many forms. Making sexual remarks or jokes with sexual overtones, sexual advances, you're displaying offensive pictures, threats, leering, physical contact, or sexual assault. So I'll give you an example. Now, I'm a hugger when we are able to hug again, hopefully sometime in the near future. But I'm also a thoughtful hugger. I'm going to make sure that the person I'm going to be hugging welcomes it and does not consider it offensive. So how do I know that? Sometimes it's just asking the other person. So the bottom line is, if you have an inkling that something is not quite right, or if you have some doubts about it, it probably isn't, unless you verify it. Now, another form of harassment that's recently come up is bullying. Now, bullying, as you and I know, has been around for a long time. It's just only started to gain prominence as a form of harassment about a decade ago. And is sometimes referred to as personal harassment. So you may come across that term also. Now, we're familiar with bullying in schools, but again, workplace bullying is something that we don't talk about very much until recently. I remember the time, this is a long time ago now, when I was working with a large global consulting firm, and one of the things that we do is designing, fancy PowerPoint presentations for our clients. And we'll spend days and days just working on one slide. Now to think about it, it's quite ridiculous. And there were times, my managers would come to me and say, CK, what's wrong with the slide? My 5-year-old son can create those PowerPoints. Like, you can do better than this. And there I was, spending 2 days to create that one slide. So it doesn't look like a table. But referring back to that, knowing what I know now, that could be a workplace bullying tactic if it causes hardship on the other person. Now, again, bullying can come in various forms. Where there's verbal bullying, you're name calling, you're being sarcastic, you're teasing, you're spreading rumors about another person, you're threatening your references, or you make references to a culture or ethnicity that is unwelcome. But guess what? Not all bullies are the same, because and this is according to the Canada Safety Council. They've identified 4 different types of bullies. And I have it listed here on the slide. The first is the screaming Mimi. So the screaming Mimi targets people in a public setting because you want to control the emotional climate at work. So you want to control how the other person feels. So that's why you humiliate them in a public setting. Now, the second one is the constant critic. So constant critics, sometimes you falsely accuse a person behind closed doors. Again, trying to control the other person's identity. Now, the two-headed snake. Now, that's a passive-aggressive person, the destroyer of reputations. And the two-headed snakes typically will spread rumors that are not wrong with the intention of damaging another person's reputation. But appearing really fine with you, but behaving in a different way. Now, the fourth type of bully that was identified again by the Canada Safety Council is the gatekeeper. Now, the gatekeeper, the reason I was called a gatekeeper is you're withholding information, you're withholding resources like time, or budget, or even training that are necessary for a person to succeed or to do their job. Now, what's the effects of workplace bullying? Number one, it adversely affects a worker's psychological or physical well-being. Number two, the perpetrator knows or should know that whatever that they're doing is causing the other party to be humiliated or intimidated. Now, third is there's this health and safety aspect of this. Whenever somebody's being bullied, it's a threat to the health and safety of your coworker. So with that in mind, now we talked about respectful workplace, what a not respectful workplace is, and also some examples of harassment. So I'm going to test your knowledge here. And And Adam, maybe you can explain how this is going to work.
Yeah, so basically, you can
So I'm
either
going to ask you,
answer in the
yeah,
chat box, or you can use your reaction function, which basically is just the hand at the top toolbar. If you click the arrow to the right side, you can either agree or disagree to what CK is saying.
okay. So agree or true, and disagree or false in this case. So I'm going to have a series of statements here, and you tell me if you believe that harassment has occurred in these situations. So the first one is improper or offensive conduct. What do you think? Do you think harassment have occurred in this case? So either T or F or thumbs up, thumbs down. All right. I think it's fairly unanimous here that yes, in this case, improper and offensive conduct, harassment has occurred in this situation. What about the second one? Be aware that the conduct is, whoops. Sorry, guys. Okay, it's okay. We'll just have it all here. So the second one, you're aware that the conduct is improper or offensive. Verna says true. Sonia says true. Okay. All right, what about the third one? The complainant was offended or harmed. Do you think harassment occurred in this case? Mostly true, and the answer is true, because if somebody feels offended or harmed, that could be a case of harassment. But again, I think sometimes it's questionable because sometimes these questions will require a little bit more digging into the information. What about one minor incident? So let's say your boss, unintentionally withheld information from you. So one minor incident. Do you think that's harassment has occurred in this situation? Yep. In this case, if it's a minor incident, typically it's not considered harassment. And what about the last one, series of incidents or one severe or major incident? Yeah, again, I think that's almost a unanimous here, that if it's a series of incidents, is repeated conduct, or is one major incident, then harassment would have occurred. Great. Adam, could we play that video, the first video?
So we were having issues with the video. They won't play, so maybe if you could just give a quick little
Yep.
briefing of.
Okay. All right, no problem. So in that video, there was these two ladies, Jennifer and Lorraine. Jennifer has been with the company for a long time, 11 years, and Lorraine was just hired, several months ago. And what happened was in that video, it shows that Lorraine was, she was moving Jennifer's files around, and that caused Jennifer to be a little flustered because she's always the detailed person at work. And Lorraine was just moving her files around and sometimes being intimidating to Jennifer, who has been around in the company for a long time. And at one point, Jennifer had overheard Lorraine speaking on the phone, telling her is like, something like, "Oh, you got to see what happened to Jennifer yesterday when I moved her files around." So in this instance, that was a deliberate attempt by Lorraine to undermine Jennifer's performance. So in this case, it's clear cut that harassment had occurred. And in this case too, the person the perpetrator of that was humiliating her colleague, was sabotaging a colleague, and it was a demeaning behavior as well. So that was an example of the video. So hopefully, at some point in the future, maybe that video is going to be available for you to download and you can look at it. So now we spent some time now talking about harassment. What is harassment? Now let's switch over and talk about what it's not. There are many things that are not harassment, surprisingly. And these are some examples of what are not harassments. It is not harassment if you're managing people, because this is where it gets confused. If you're managing people and their performance, it is not harassment. And you can tell people that they're wrong. You can ask for better performance, and you can also discipline them. But these actions has to be appropriate. So with this in mind, let's play another video if it's possible to show what are some areas of managing people's performance. Are you to play this one?
Just give me 1 second, CK. I'll check.
Okay.
Well, my name's Joseph. I've been a mechanic all my life. I've loved cars. I used to help my dad work on cars when I was a kid. I've worked at this shop for years. It used to be a great place to work. Used to be.
Okay, well, it's good work.
Thanks.
My name is Rick. I've been a mechanic most of my life. The former manager, Al, well, he's done some great things with the place. Well, I'm just looking to move things in a new direction with service and productivity.
My buddy Al used to run this shop. He used to let us do it our way. He knew how to run a shop. Now, Rick, on the other hand, it's purchase orders, it's computers, it's memos. I don't have to put up with this.
I really believe that this shop needs rules, just to be fair to everybody. And Joe, our senior mechanic, I just hope he sets a good example.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, it's 9:25. I asked you to be in here at 9.
I'll try. I'll try harder, okay?
All right.
So, okay. He's always behind me. He's always following me around.
I'm just here to help, Joe.
Seems to be watching every move I make. Hey, why can't Rick just let me do my job? I don't know, just give me a car. I can work on it. I don't need all this paperwork.
Look, we can get it done. Things are changing around here, Joe.
Okay. Oh, whatever. Okay.
I know Joe's having a hard time adjusting, but he needs to take direction just like everybody else. Third time this week. 9 o'clock is when we start.
Look, I come in when I want. It's been going on like that for years. I come in when I want.
I've warned him many times, and I don't want to come down hard on him, but he's got to obey the rules just like everybody else in the shop. Okay. Joe, I need your help here. I need my senior mechanic to get this one done.
Look, it's not my problem you overbook things. I started this car. I'm going to finish this car.
Joe.
That's the way it's always been.
Joe.
I'm sick of the way he's running things around here. I know what I'm doing. I shouldn't have to put up with this.
Harassment in the workplace is not.
So what do you think of this? Do you think harassment is evident here? Anybody have any thoughts? Yeah. In this case, it's reasonable to expect that employees show up to work on time. And in this instance, again, Rick is Joe's new supervisor, and he's trying to take the shop to the next level. And he's just managing Joe's non-performance, just not listening to instructions and not being a team player. And it's just displaying, that sort of a passive-aggressive type behavior. So it is reasonable then that this is not harassment. So I'm going to test your knowledge a little bit here again. So again, this time it's yes, no, maybe, either Y, N, or M, whether harassment has occurred in these instances. So if a friendly pat on the back, what do you think? Is there harassment here? Yeah, most people think that it's no, but sometimes this comes in a gray area, especially if you're dealing with somebody of the opposite gender or opposite sex. Um, so it's something that you want to bear in mind as well to think about this. And again, if always in doubt, ask. Um, what about you disagreeing with a workplace rule? Is there harassment? No, that's right. Because you're just disagreeing with a rule that's in place, you're not necessarily harassing anybody here. What about making fun of someone's accent? Yep, so unanimous yes. Or if you're retaliating for making a harassment complaint. Great. Man, you guys are on a roll here. Or telling someone they have to work overtime. Okay, yep, because this is more work performance, right? It's related to your work. And last one, you're at work and you see two people arguing about a personal matter. Is there harassment going on here? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a little bit of maybes here, but I would say that in this case, it's no, because it's not work related. They're arguing a personal matter. It's just a coincidence that they are at work. So again, sometimes there's just some ambiguity, some situations that are a little bit more ambiguous. That is where we need to go in and dig deeper into what's really going on. Great, thank you for participating here. So now we talked about respectful workplace, what a respectful workplace looks like, what it doesn't look like. We talked about harassment, and let's talk about rules and responsibilities, because all of us, you and I included, everyone has to have a role to ensure that the workplace they were in is one that is respectful and is something for everyone in the organization. So I'll just quickly run through 4 major roles typically in an organization. So if you are a manager, one of your role is you need to foster a respectful and safe working environment that's free of any harassment. What does this mean? You got to walk the talk, right? So if you're promoting something that is harassment free, you got to be able to make sure that you're communicating it right and you're actually walking it. So by setting an example of what is appropriate workplace behavior, what does that mean? Have a discussion with your staff, with your team, what you expect to see from them, and how they should behave around one another so that it's respectful. And one way is, by sharing that respectful workplace policy. Share it with your team, communicate it with other stakeholders, with your vendors, whoever that you deal with. What does the policy say about respectful behavior? What does the policy say about harassment, and how we can all be together and build a culture that is harassment free? And if there are any incidents or harassment situations that come up, or if you're made aware of them, whether or not there's a formal complaint, deal with it immediately. Don't let it stew. Now, a typical role is also for an employee. And if you're an employee, treat all people with respect. Speak up if you feel that you're being harassed or if you see someone being harassed. And remind your colleague and stakeholders, other people, about the policy and what it says. And if there are any incidents that you've seen or have experienced, report it to the appropriate people. And again, respect confidentiality, because a lot of these cases, they're very sensitive. So make sure that you respect confidentiality and privacy for anyone who's involved in any complaints. And if you're a member of the union or representing the union, again, you got to treat all people with respect. You got to ensure that your own conduct is not harassing, and support the policies for your collective agreements or from your corporate policies regarding the investigation process. Going to make sure that you're abiding by all of the rules there, and discuss the policy with anybody that is approaching you with a possible complaint. Look through it. Does it fall under the category, the category of harassment? And again, as a union representative, you got to respect the privacy and confidentiality of anyone who's involved in a complaint. And the other role is if you're a contractor or a vendor. You got to treat all people with respect. Speak up if you feel like you're being harassed, or if you witness something, and report those harassment incidents to the appropriate people. And again, always respect confidentiality and privacy of anyone who is involved in this. I'm going to move on now to the complaint process, the investigation process. Again, these steps here are fairly generic and it may not be applicable to in every situation, but in general, these are the steps that are generally taken. It has to be aligned with your organization's policies and the harassment policies and the processes that are aligned, that are documented in there. So the first thing here is, first step, stop. If you feel like you're being harassed or you've seen an incident, tell the perpetrator to stop. But you have to be respectful in the way that you're saying it. And you got to be careful in this situation because you don't want to be engaging in a harassing situation. Because we've done investigations where not only did we find the complainant or the respondent to be guilty of harassment, but also the complainant. Stop means stop. It's not harassing back. The second step here is tell or ask. So typically your policies is going to typically tell you who to tell, who you should approach if something happens. And the person who is receiving that information, you should be neutral and empathic because there are always two sides to everything. Get the facts and not let emotions get in the way. And address the situation, whatever it may be, because it may not even be related to harassment. So if an employer or a worker advises you that they feel that they're being harassed, so have a discussion with them to determine what the next steps are. Get some details and also what the person is looking for a resolution. What is the intention there? And again, you want to maintain a positive and healthy work environment. So people need to know their rights and what their responsibilities are. And they need to know and understand the kind of situations and behaviors that are not acceptable. Again, confidentiality and privacy are extremely important when you're dealing with alleged harassment, because unless it is proven, it is just an allegation. So even if there is no harassment that took place, there has to be some sort of a restoration in the workplace. And sometimes it's really difficult in smaller communities or organizations because you don't have that many options. People work in really close proximity and if someone is going to be off work, it's hard to absorb that work or have someone else pick it up. The third step here is you start into a complaint process, informal or formal complaint. So in this case, you would go through the policy again very briefly and understand, what do you have to do if there is a complaint of alleged harassment. If the situation provides you an opportunity to address the matter at the time, use that, do that. But one thing that you cannot do is you can't tell the person not to file a complaint. Remember that everybody has a right to file a complaint. So other considerations here. Don't assume that harassment has occurred because there are always two sides to a story. Like we have been involved in several investigations where, some of the complaint was found to not be harassment. The complainant had perceived the behavior as harassment, and it was perhaps not appropriate behavior, but it didn't fall under the definition of what harassment is. And the other thing that you have to ensure is retaliation. You're going to make sure that the respondent and whomever else that's necessary in there knows that retaliation is not going to be tolerated. So you cannot do that. And when you're filing a complaint, your conversations may be facilitated by an independent person from inside your company or your organization. And sometimes it could be your supervisor or manager. It depends on what you have on your policy. Step 4 is the investigation process. Again, you got to refer back to the policy and the forms if available, and always stick to the basic facts. such as finding out, who is being harassed, who is harassing, what the harassment was about, the incident in question, where it occurred, when it occurred, the impact of the harassment on the complainant, and any witnesses who may or may have not have who may have seen or seen something similar or related to that incident or situation. Now, when we do investigations and we encourage this, and it has to be prompt. The investigations, when you're doing it, whoever the investigators are, they have to be prompt, they have to be fair, they have to be impartial. That means not taking sides and not forming conclusions, and it has to be confidential. And typically, the process involves the investigators having private and confidential interviews with the relevant parties, including the person who made the complaint, the complainant, the person who is alleged to have caused the harassment, or the respondent, and any witnesses that may have seen or witnessed something. And typically in an investigation process or the interviews, you can have a support person with you. At the end of the day, you just got to find out, what's really going on in that situation. So has that relationship been damaged for some time? And what's the basis of the complaint? Did something happen? And part of the investigation also is, you come up with a report. So the report in a nutshell includes a summary of the alleged harassment, a listing of whether or not the alleged harassment incident in question had occurred, or whether in fact it did occur or did not occur. And if requested, we will provide recommendations for how to move forward with that, and also identify options for workplace restoration if there is appropriate. And then some of the conclusions could also be, discipline. Some of the recommendations could be, implementation of any disciplinary measures, additional training, work monitoring, or any relationship mending that has to occur. So I'm going to skip over now and continue on from my colleague Stephen's presentation from the last webinar, where he was looking at HR policies in general. And we'll look at some key components in anti-harassment policy. So what are some key components in here? The first one is, every worker is entitled to an employment that is free from harassment and discrimination. The second one is, what is the definition of harassment? We've provided some examples earlier today. Responsibilities of employer and employees in cases of harassment, which we have also covered a little bit today. And what is the process for employees to follow if they have been subjected to a harassment or have witnessed a harassment incident? Where should they go? Who should they contact? Where will it go? And if there's an investigation, then who needs to be involved? Who needs to be informed? And at the end of the investigation, who needs to receive a copy of the contract? What do people see? Do people just see the summary or the full details of the report in question? And also, there has to be the endeavor to enforce this policy and to take corrective action. Now, here's something to note too. Board and council are by default not covered by your policies unless it is explicitly mentioned. So again, this one is important here. Council is typically by default not covered by the policy unless it specifically says so. Now, we talked about key components of your policies, but there are also some legal responsibilities from management to ensure that the workplace is respectful and free of harassment. There are some statutory responsibilities that management has to ensure that this is in place. So some of those legal responsibilities include you're building a culture in the workplace that discourages harassment, where you can keep an eye and monitor the workplace to ensure there's no harassment happening or any situation that may lead to a harassment. And lastly, if you do receive complaints, that you have to refer them to human resources or the appropriate parties as listed in your policies. So I like to just put it out there. This is the end of the actual presentation itself. Just maybe highlight in your chat box or even speak if their mic is on. What are some of the top 3 things that you have learned today that's going to help you create that caring and respectful workplace? So with that in mind, now we've shared a tremendous amount of information in less than an hour. I'm sure it's good investment of your time. So again, at K&A HR, we're all about connecting people and sharing knowledge. And everything that we do centers around these 2 values that define who we are and what we do. So some of the areas that we focus on is in policy development, investigations, trainings, and even trainings that's specific to respectful workplace on all aspects of human resources, including but not limited to compensation, people performance management, and organization effectiveness. So with that, I'm just going to open it up for questions, and I'd like to thank you for being here. So we have a few minutes for any questions and answers that I can help you with. Feel free to type in the chat box or unmute your mic and speak.
Thank you, CK. Adam is just going to move over the question and answer panel box for me to read the questions out.
Yep.
Okay. Does that mean council can bully staff and not be held responsible?
No, it does not mean that. It just means that if your policy has a bit of a loophole there, I'd encourage you to close that out. And even if it's not explicitly stated, bullying should not be happening from council. And again, there are appropriate parties that you have to put this to, and perhaps through the human resource department.
Thank you. The next question, where would an employee complain if it's council who is doing the bullying and harassment?
This again goes back to the policy. That's why we encourage you to take a look at your policy and how airtight it is, and explicitly say that council should also be involved or be privy be part of this policy, and then develop a process that cater to that to make sure that all of these areas are covered.
Thank you. Got another question. Any suggestions on how to write ratepayer respect towards municipal employees in the harassment policy?
Is this about the citizens respect to people who are working in council?
This was Jennifer from the RM 434. If you want to respond in the Q&A, but how I read the question is the ratepayers are the folks that the council and the municipal employees take care of and respond to. So I'm guessing that she means how do they incorporate ratepayer respect, those individuals that come into the RM office? How do they include that for respect to the municipal employees?
Right. Again, I think the harassment policy has to include because like typically what we expect is customers, because we should not be tolerating any types of harassment from ratepayers or from customers as well, because it will also go back to the policies, and it should be addressed that way.
Right. Just for a little bit of clarification on that question.
I understand that some.
Sorry. Some ratepayers are really bullying the staff in the RM office. So I think they're just looking for a little bit of information on how they can incorporate that harassment into their current policy that they might have.
So one example is as you're writing this policy that includes we will not tolerate anybody, whether it's customers or any stakeholders that are coming in with a harassing attitude. If so, actions will be taken and investigation will be put in place if appropriate. Something like that, wording in along those lines, that we will take action because we will not tolerate disrespectful behavior.
Thank you. Another question. If there is no policy or it is not covered in the policy, could an employee complain somewhere else if council is harassing employees?
Typically, yes, because even if there's no policy, the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission has something in place where, even if there's no policy, it will go back to the provincial regulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Jennifer is saying that you're revising your policy right now, so I hope this helps. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to contact us, and we'll see where we can help you.
Thank you, CK. Another question. What kind of action can actually be taken against a ratepayer?
This is not an easy one to answer because a lot of times when we do the investigations, it's about whether a harassment situation had occurred or didn't occur. So it really depends on, from a legal aspect then what can happen. But many times, when a harassment has proven to have occurred, typically that's enough, to have a communication with whoever that was the alleged perpetrator to come up with some sort of a resolution. It's very rare that investigations will go to the legal side of things.
Thank you, CK.
But it is still possible.
Thank you. Are there any other questions that anybody has that's on the call? If you want to pop them into the question and answer panel. I'll wait for a couple of moments here while people think.
Yep.
I don't see any questions coming up. So with that, I would like to say thank you to CK for taking time this morning to meet with all of us and share some really great information. A quick reminder to everybody on the call that this information will be available for download, and we will also have it included on our website, and we will send that information out following the call as well. So thank you and have a great rest of your morning.
All right. Thank you, guys.